let us know. I'm Shay Pepler-Cornett, filling in for Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin, as is my husband over there, smiling at me, Jordan Cornett. We're happy to welcome in Sal Paolantonio right now. He's our ESPN NFL reporter, and he's also the host of ESPN NFL Matchup Show on Saturdays at 8:30 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Sal Pal, hope you're doing well this morning. Okay, there's a lot of buzz going on in Philadelphia, and it starts with Jalen Hurts. He's got 2 starts under his belt, and he is doing things that we have not seen from a Philly quarterback in a minute. What is kind of the notion around Philly fans in terms of Jalen Hurts and wanting him to remain the starter?
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, there are a lot of polls out there, radio stations, newspapers, Twitter polls, and people are pretty split. I think people are split. Obviously, they've fallen in love with Jalen Hurts and his toughness and his playmaking ability because it's in stark contrast from what they've seen so far from Carson Wentz this year. But there's a lot of love still for Carson Wentz in town. You know, Carson Wentz is a community leader. He's been at the forefront of many charities in town. And obviously, that Super Bowl year doesn't happen without Carson Wentz and his performance up until he got injured in Los Angeles and blew out his knee. So there's still quite a bit of love for Carson Wentz, but people understand that there's going to have to be a choice. And people are taking sides based on what they've seen in the first 2 games, and they like what they've seen from Jalen Hurts.
Sal, it was interesting listening to Rex Ryan. It's always entertaining, and he kind of went on a little bit of a rant on Get Up, talking about how Carson Wentz is a crybaby for saying that he doesn't want to be the backup and he'd want to be relocated. I thought it was entertaining. I'm not sure if it was fair from Coach Rex Ryan to say that about Carson Wentz. And then he went on further to say the organization, the fan base, how could they want a guy like this? What was your reaction to Carson Wentz making those statements?
Well, Carson Wentz hasn't made any statements. So far, we've had, obviously corroborated stories by our best NFL reporter. I mean, the best NFL reporter there is, Adam Schefter, suggesting that there are people around Carson Wentz and maybe himself who would like to move on if he's the number 2 quarterback. Well, I don't know anybody who wants to be the number 2 quarterback after being the number 1 quarterback in the same city. So to me, that's a perfectly natural thing to say, that you don't want to play back up to Jalen Hurts and you'd rather have a fresh start. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that. He hasn't said it publicly. All I know about Carson Wentz is he's always been a team guy since he got here. Nobody's interviewed him more than I have at ESPN. And I've always found him to be on the up and up and to be a team player and support his teammates and support his coaching staff. So if he wants to play somewhere else because Jalen Hurts has become the number 1 quarterback, can you blame him? If I were him, I certainly would want a fresh start somewhere else if I thought I could get a starting job, say, in Indianapolis, or how about the New York Jets? Joe Douglas is there. He was in Philly. They won the game in Los Angeles. They probably are not going to get Trevor Lawrence. Could you see Carson Wentz traded to the Jets? I mean, there's lots of plausible opportunities for him to go elsewhere. And, I think it's the last time I looked, the NFL was a multi-billion-dollar business that always treats the players in the end as part of that business model. So why, as a player, wouldn't you want to take care of your own business?
Yeah, absolutely, Sal. And before you joined us, I was suggesting the idea, remember, Shay, of Carson Wentz being a fantastic fit for the Jets, because I do think he needs a change of scenery, and I do think he can play high-level football and be the guy that's a franchise quarterback if he goes somewhere else. If you were to look into your crystal ball, Sal, how do you envision this playing out for Carson Wentz?
Yeah, I don't play the crystal ball thing. I think I'd rather do the reporting, but I'll tell you this. It's a legitimate question. It's one that I get asked everywhere, all of the time. I live here. The guy who delivers my mail is an Eagles fan. The guy who cuts my lawn, the guy who cuts my hair, everywhere, all the time. And it's a legitimate question, and I simply don't have the answer to this. But I'll answer it this way. If Doug Peterson and that coaching staff doesn't do a better job of protecting Jalen Hurts, in the next 2 games, this is not even a conversation we're going to have about who's going to be the starting quarterback, because Jalen Hurts is not the size of Carson Wentz. He was sacked, brutally sacked 6 times and hit and pressured multiple times in that game against Arizona. Everybody in the world knows that Vance Joseph is the most blitzing defensive coordinator in the league. The percentages are super high. Arizona blitzes. They blitzed over 50% of Jalen Hurts' dropbacks. The league average per game is somewhere around 33 or 35%. They came after him with 5, 6, 7 guys. There were times where I thought that Jalen Hurts was not going to get up. And as Ryan Clark said, he proved to be super tough. But you can only take so much punishment if you're 6'1", 215 pounds at the quarterback position. Yeah. They better do a better job of pass protection using tight ends, jumbo packages, blitz protection in the next 2 games, because it's on tape. In the second half against New Orleans, Dennis Allen came after Jalen Hurts. All game long, Vance Joseph came after Jalen Hurts. Do you know the Cowboys are going to come after him this weekend? I'm telling you right now, if you look at the tape of that game, and I have, we're not even having this conversation of Hurts versus Wentz if they don't start protecting Jalen Hurts, because Carson Wentz got brutalized, if you remember, the first 12 to 13 games that he was in there. So they got to protect this young man.
Yeah, without a doubt. Quickly before we let you go, Sal Pal. So no doubt Jalen Hurts has come in and given this offense a spark. However he has done it, it's very visible, right? I know they just came off a loss, but yet still they played very close. So the question I have is why is Doug Peterson so hesitant to just go on and just call Jalen Hurts the starter after these games, after a win, after he's played so well? Why does he have to wait a day or 2 to confirm that he will start for the next game?
Because this is all new to Doug, I'm not going to make excuses for his hesitancy, but you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. He said he was married to Carson Wentz. He said earlier in the year it would send the wrong message to the team if he changed quarterbacks they were giving up on the season. He's trying to figure out how to go forward here. This is uncharted territory for everybody. So I'm going to give Doug Peterson the benefit of the doubt and allow him to study the tape as a head coach should, to look at this young man after 2 starts and see whether or not he's going to stick with him or go back to Carson Wentz. I think he has earned that right. He made the playoffs for 3 straight years. This is the first time in 4 years he's probably not going to make the playoffs. If Washington beats Carolina on Sunday, they're eliminated. The Eagles are eliminated. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And this is a really difficult choice that they have to make, given the money, the behind-the-scenes politics of it all, the fact that these 2 quarterbacks couldn't be more different. One's a dual-threat quarterback, one's a drop-back quarterback. And I think this is a tough decision for Doug Peterson and this organization. And I'm going to let them go through the process of making this decision without prejudging the situation in any way, shape, or form.
All right. Sal Paolantonio knows it better than anyone. Thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it. We'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you for having me on the show, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody.
Absolutely.
Same to you, Sal Pal. Thank you. So, okay, he says some interesting things there. I think obviously he's giving both Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson the benefit of the doubt here because of what they've built there in Philadelphia. And he makes a good point. That is fair. That is fair to do. But from someone who's from the outside looking in, who is not living in Philadelphia, who has not covered this team as closely, and who maybe doesn't have as long of a leash, and I'm not giving them as big of a benefit of the doubt. And maybe that's just, a hasty attitude. But to me, it sometimes feels like there's confusion because of the money that Carson Wentz has been paid.
Well, no question.
And because you don't want to hurt his feelings. And then when you have reports that are coming out saying he doesn't want to be the backup quarterback, well, of course, no one wants to be. He's right in that sense. Like anyone would.
But that's why, can I interrupt really quick?
Yes,
that's what was really fascinating to me, too, because this is how things snowball, right? Sal did a great job of making sure to clarify. When I asked a question, I said these statements from Carson Wentz that he's unhappy being the backup. which I would understand to feel that. And I said the statements Wentz is making about being the backup and wanting to go somewhere else. And Shay, what did Sal quickly correct me on?
Well, he never made those statements.
He didn't make those statements. They are reports, which it means, yes, they're true. They're coming from Shefty. That makes them accurate. But the bigger thing is, this isn't Carson Wentz getting up somewhere and saying, I'm not happy being the backup. I don't care what Jalen Hurts is doing to help us win. I don't want to be here. He's not doing that. And I think that's a little bit unfair when people want to kind of mold this narrative that this is a guy being a crybaby and doesn't have the best interests of the team, is a me guy. No, he's a guy that doesn't want to be a backup. He's driven like any other athlete or human who's competitive, but he's not being a distraction because he's not coming out making these comments. They're merely reports.
I hear you. But at the same time, like, let's look at Cam Newton, for example. How many times was Cam Newton benched in the fourth quarter this year? Was it 3, 2? I've lost count. Point is, after a game, we weren't asking Cam Newton. I get his contract structure is completely different, and I understand it's 2 different quarterbacks. But the conversation then wasn't, well, what if you become the backup to Jarrett Stidham? That was not the conversation. And had it been, we would have all been dogging Cam Newton and saying, why are we having these conversations? You didn't play well, so you were benched. Do you understand what I'm saying?